as not of strain. And I think that's the right way to interpret these demonstrations as well.
Right, Ambassador Mike McFaul, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and insights. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
And the news of Navalny's death also impacting American politics. Former President Trump breaking his silence about the opposition leader's death, but not condemning Russian President Putin. NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake with what President Biden is contemplating.
3 years ago, President Biden warned Putin of devastating consequences if Alexei Navalny died in Russian custody. Tonight, Mr. Biden says he's weighing new sanctions.
We already have sanctions moving. We're considering additional sanctions.
Tonight, Republican frontrunner Donald Trump's first comment on Navalny, making no mention of Putin or Russia, writing, "The sudden death of Alexei Navalny has made me more and more aware of what is happening in our country." Nikki Haley slamming that comment and Trump's recent remarks that he would encourage Russia to attack NATO allies unwilling to meet defense spending goals.
He sided with a dictator who kills his political opponents.
The Biden campaign also looking to exploit those comments.
Every president since Truman has been a rock-solid supporter of NATO.
Targeting this digital ad to the 900,000 Michigan voters with roots in NATO border states. Voters like Andy Ladek, a U.S. Army veteran who immigrated from Poland as a child, and finds the remarks disqualifying for a would-be commander-in-chief.
For someone like a former president of the United States, to say something like that is beyond the pale. It's just totally unacceptable.
But President Biden faces an uphill battle here in Michigan, where polls show Mr. Trump in a strong position.
Garrett joins us now from Troy, Michigan. So Garrett, we know former President Trump has also been critical of sending aid to Ukraine. Could the death of Navalny put pressure on Congress to pass that stalled aid package for Ukraine?
I think that's unlikely, Ellison, unless and until Donald Trump changes his tune about either Navalny or the aid package. For now, I think it's going to take some other bigger political change to affect House Republicans' commitment on Ukraine, possibly attaching that aid to government funding or some other must-pass bill. Right now, Congress is out the rest of the week, and that aid package is going nowhere fast. Ellison?
Garrett Haake, thank you. For more on Donald Trump and the state of the 2024 race, let's bring in Garrett Ventry, the founder of GRV Strategies and Message Impact and former GOP communications advisor. Garrett, thank you for joining us tonight. I want to ask you more about Trump's comments, where Garrett was just reporting there, as it relates to Alexei Navalny and comparing it in many ways to his own legal woes. Do you think Trump not condemning Putin impacts voters and any sort of concerns they may have?
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I think if we take a step back on this, there certainly could be, comments made here, and I think the president will address this here in the next coming days. I'm sure he'll be asked about it on the campaign trail. But again, if you take a step back here and you look at President Trump's record when it comes to Russia, you're talking about he sanctioned Putin multiple times during his administration. And the two times that Putin has invaded Ukraine was once under President Obama and now another time under President Biden. So I think that there is some weakness on the world stage that President Biden has portrayed. You've seen this whether it's with the attack on Israel from Hamas. You've seen this with Afghanistan falling to the Taliban here. So the foreign policy question we're seeing here is not about rhetoric, but action here. And President Trump is one of the strongest presidents we've had on Russia. And so I think impacting that, voters will have to take a look at that going on this into 2024.
You mentioned his record with Russia. Let's talk a little more about that, because I want to show some video from 2018. Putin and Trump met at a summit in Helsinki, Finland. I was a reporter covering it at the time. They met for hours, and then while standing next to President Trump oversaw. Trump was roundly criticized for this at the time. Even the Republican House Speaker released a statement condemning Trump for his comments in this summit. If Trump is not willing to criticize Russia in this moment, does that in some ways leave a door open to prove those critics in 2018 right? And I know you mentioned some of his record, but if they look at that and they point to this moment and then that big moment on a massive viewing global stage to say Donald Trump is soft on Vladimir Putin, do they have strong evidence for it?
They don't have strong evidence on that. Again, you're looking at here, you're talking about sanctions and the world and our NATO allies. Ukraine is one were more safe when President Trump was the president. You're talking about right now it is Joe Biden who's the president when this is happening here. This death of obviously his leading opposition in prison is obviously very concerning here, and I hope that we do get to the bottom, but it's probably obviously Putin who did this. Putin is someone who is a thug, someone who should be condemned here, and you're talking about President Trump, though, does have a very, very strong record when you're coming to Russia. Again, the sanctions, and you're talking about the world and our NATO allies, including Ukraine, who's obviously not part of NATO, were safer when President Trump was in office.
Is it a problem, though, for Trump as a candidate, politically speaking, when you have someone like Tim Scott, right, his former rival turned very important surrogate, who was on CNN? I actually think we have a clip of it that we can play for you. This is what he had to say on CNN.
The murderous dictator that is President always looks for ways to take out the competition, and any strong leadership coming from America actually pushes back against Russia and other dictators. Unfortunately, Joe Biden is not up for that charge, and Donald Trump is.
Is it a good look politically to have a high-profile surrogate take verbally a tougher stance on Putin, particularly when that surrogate is a South Carolina senator and you have the South Carolina primary in less than a week? What would you be advising Trump to do in terms of what he's saying about this right now?
I think President Trump should just point to his record here. Again, we're talking about President Biden and others can talk and have rhetoric on this here. You're talking about action. Again, the sanctions he sanctioned multiple Russian officials, and it goes back to just the stats here. You're talking about Obama again. Crimea was invaded and annexed under Obama. Under Biden, you had Russia and Ukraine that continued a 2-year bloodshed war there, which is, costing the U.S. billions of dollars, obviously.
But Donald Trump isn't saying any of that right now on the campaign trail. Do you think he should be pointing that out? I mean, are you content with the statement he's given thus far?
I'm sure he will point that out again here, and voters will know his record going into 2024. The world was a safer place under Donald Trump. You can just look at the facts. There were no new wars. He obliterated ISIS. Putin was not invading Ukraine under Donald Trump. He was doing it under Joe Biden because he senses weakness from Joe Biden on the world stage.
Let's talk a little bit about Nikki Haley here, especially as we get so close to that primary in South Carolina. She's now come out multiple times criticizing Trump's comments on both NATO and Navalny, and she's also issued arguably some of her strongest attacks on the legal woes as it relates to the former president. Give us a realistic gut check here. What do you think her future in this race looks like after South Carolina? Is there any chance the polls are wrong and she maybe tightens the gap in South Carolina? If she loses, do you think she drops out?
Yeah, it's a great question here, and I mean, she just can't pick. She's been asked this on the campaign trail multiple times. What state did she win? She can't point to one. She said, she was going to perform well on New Hampshire. She lost to President Trump by double digits. She got destroyed by 35 points in Iowa, I believe. You're talking about South Carolina. The polling, Trump's up 30 points there. She can't, again, point to a state that she's going to win here. And so I just don't know what her path forward is here. Donald Trump has dominated this race. I think everybody can see this here. He's going to be the nominee. I think there's just as good a chance of Dean Phillips being the Democrat nominee as there is for Nikki Haley being the Republican nominee. It's not going to happen. Trump has a stranglehold on the Republican Party here. He's leading in all the polls going forward against Nikki Haley, and matches up very strongly in your NBC poll against Joe Biden. Your recent one shows him up 47-42, and he's beating Joe Biden on the issues that matter to voters: immigration, economy, inflation, and national security. And even with all this Russia talk here, you're talking about he has a strong lead on national security policy over the last year in every single poll that you can think of today.
All right, a lot to watch this week. Again, the South Carolina primary, not even a week away. Garrett Ventry, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Next tonight, moving overseas, the IDF saying it has struck Hezbollah storage facilities in Lebanon. You can see here what appears to be the huge explosions from those Israeli strikes. The IDF says it targeted the area after a drone it believes came from Lebanon was launched in the direction towards Israel. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now with more. So Raf, what do we know about these strikes as of right now?
So these strikes took place just outside the Lebanese city of Sidon. It's about halfway up the coast of Lebanon, which is significant because that is further inland than most Israeli strikes so far since October 7th. Those have been tended to focus further down towards the Israel-Lebanon border, where a lot of Hezbollah's firepower is concentrated. As you said, Israel says it was responding to an armed drone that flew over the border earlier in the day. It says that there were 2 Hezbollah weapons depots, and you can see just the scale of those explosions. The Lebanese state media is saying that commercial factories, at least 14 people were injured, and that most of them are Syrian and Palestinian workers. Elsa?
Yeah, so as you said, there have been these strikes across the Israel-Lebanon border between the IDF and Hezbollah really since the early beginnings of the war in Gaza. But when you see a strike like this, that goes so much deeper into another country's territory, it could change things, right? I mean, do we expect Hezbollah to respond in a bigger way here?
Yeah, Alice, it's a really good question. Hezbollah has a kind of complicated internal calculus when it decides how to respond. On the one hand, for its own sense of self, as Israel, it will feel that it needs to respond. On the other hand, we've seen it pretty careful throughout the war, not attacking Israel at such a scale that it would provoke a full-scale war, at least not yet. Remember, the economy in Lebanon is absolutely devastated. Hezbollah does have its own domestic constituency, but most Lebanese do not want to see a full-scale war with Israel at this point. The leader of Hezbollah has said Israel will pay in blood for the deaths of civilians inside of Lebanon. It doesn't look at this point were killed. It is worth noting Israel carried out that drone strike, which killed massive, and that happened in the suburbs of Lebanon's capital. And even though that strike took place in such a sensitive location, Hezbollah's response was actually very restrained.
Raf Sanchez, thank you. Staying now with the escalating tensions in the Middle East. Over the weekend, the U.S. launched a pilot task into target in Yemen. One of those strikes destroying an underwater drone. Forces firing back, attacking a British cargo ship in the Red Sea. All of this as the Pentagon says they're investigating a crash involving a U.S. military drone off the coast of Yemen. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Hughey joins us now. So Courtney, walk us through what we know about these latest attacks as of now.
It's a really dynamic environment, Allison. So on that underwater drone that you mentioned, that's the first time the Houthis have done anything like that. We've seen them launch surface vessels, so sea drones that sit on the top of the water, and the U.S. has been able to take some of those out. It's the first time that they, as far as the U.S. knows, they've actually used one that's gone underwater, essentially a submarine drone. We are learning a little bit more. You mentioned that there was an MQ-9 Reaper drone that crashed today near the port city of Hodeida in Yemen. The Houthis are claiming they shot that down with a missile, that even though it shows the drone being shot down and some of the wreckage washing up along the shore, but the U.S. military says they are still investigating what brought that drone down. It wouldn't be the first time Houthis have actually taken out a U.S. drone in recent months. Now, there have also been a number of commercial vessels that have been targeted. A British-owned ship that was shot with an anti-ship ballistic missile on Sunday, disabling the ship. The crew actually abandoned the vessel, and there's at least one coalition military ship that's still there on scene. But in addition to that, Allison, we are just learning details this evening about 2 U.S.-owned ships, commercial ships, that were targeted. One by an anti-ship ballistic missile that fell short of the ship, but another one by a drone that also fell short of the ship, but the impact on the water caused some minor damage. Both of the ships were able to move along, but as you mentioned, a real escalation of the tensions in the region as these Houthi attacks continue. We've also learned the U.S. have carried out several dynamic or self-defense strikes again. So both sides continuing their back and forth, Ellison.
So, Courtney, what will you be watching for in the next 24 hours? When you talk to your sources there at the Pentagon, is there any indication that those strikes they've already started to carry out, they could do even more of those dynamic strikes in the next 24 or 48 hours?
Mission is complete. Good work. work.
Yes, absolutely. We should expect to see those sorts of dynamic strikes really every single day. Every time the Houthis pop up a global missile launcher or a drone launcher, the U.S. is moving in and they are taking them out. And that's because the authorities have changed. Now the authority to carry out those strikes is at the U.S. military, the uniform military level, so they happen very quickly. But I think the big question we should all be watching for is, will there be more of the larger retaliatory strikes? Those are the ones we saw a couple of weeks ago, first in Iraq and Syria, and then next in Yemen. We've been told by a number of U.S. officials that those are supposed to be carried out over a matter of weeks, maybe in waves. So the reality is we could see more of those larger retaliatory strikes in coming days, Allison.
Courtney Cubie outside of the Pentagon. Still ahead tonight, missing in Spain. A Florida woman vanishing from a Madrid apartment amid a messy divorce back home. The text message received a day after she disappeared.